We all have these warring parts of ourselves, and these parts of ourselves that, we try to ignore. The Crucible Project tells us, hey, you know what? Recognize that, see it, love it, appreciate it.
Welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crucible Project podcast. My name is Andy Spell, and I will be your host for today. I'm excited to have Tony Bradburn with us. Tony is from the Chicagoland area. He is a leader in that area, and I'm excited, Tony, for you to be with us today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Andy.
I'm excited to have a conversation with you today about what Crucible has meant for you and some of the work that's going on in the areas that you're leading. So, Tony, tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you live, about your family, what you do, just so the audience will know a little bit about you today.
Absolutely. So, my name's Tony Bradburn. I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I was adopted when I was about 6 months old. And so I grew up, with white parents, two older white brothers who really were amazing and still are amazing. So I'm grateful and thankful for that family. And I must say that part of my story when I think about that identity piece is one of curiosity. So I've always wondered what happened with my birth parents and what sort of circumstances must they've been wrestling with in order to think that this is the best decision. And so back in 2005, I had the opportunity to go down to the Dominican Republic for the second time. I went when I was in high school and then had this opportunity. And really it was to look, and so my brother came with and his wife and my wife at the time. And so it was a great opportunity and it felt just God breathed. And I went to the orphanage I was at. I went to the hospital I was born in and went to the Department of Health, and there was really just no records about my birth. And so had the opportunity to actually get on a television show down there. And he's hard to explain, this sort of host. He was kind of like a mixture between like Jay Leno and Oprah Winfrey, like very much just an entertainer of the highest caliber. And he said, hey, why don't you come on TV and I broadcast to the whole country and maybe someone will know something about your story. And so in 2005 did that, and did not end up bearing fruit, but it was an adventure. And I met someone who thought she was my birth mother, but she was not in time. We learned that.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So basically, I spent my time growing up in a town of Elgin, which is more or less like a microcosm of the United States. So it's a river town. It really kind of cut its teeth on steel and other water-powered mills and so on and so forth. And it was a town of about 100,000. It had subsidized housing towards the river. It had two country clubs on either end of the town, and really everything in between from a socioeconomic, standpoint, and then also racially. So it really was a hub for refugees from that time. At least they're mostly from Laos. So there was a decent population of Asian, and then also Black and white and Mexican and Puerto Rican. And so it was really a great community for me to grow up in. And I grew up going to a Lutheran church, really pretty liturgical and structured. It felt very much like a Catholic church, but obviously it's Lutheran. And then went to college and did all that and became a teacher, and later became an administrator and became a director for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now I'm starting to be a principal at an elementary school, and it's exciting. I mean, there's a lot going on. When it comes to TCP, I went, in the late 2006, I think it was, to Chicago, weekend, and it was in the woods. They call it House in the Woods. And so that was where my initial weekend happened.
Man, so you've been in this work for a long time, almost 18 years now.
Yeah. What keeps me coming back, I think, is just the fact that my own life was transformed, was able to, recognize that my parents are amazing, and it's okay to be curious, and it's okay to want to know more about my origin story. And so I've had opportunities to do that since, but maybe we'll get there later.
Yeah. So are you married?
No, went through a divorce about 10 years ago. I have 4 beautiful kids. My oldest is going to be 21 on Saturday, so watch out. And then,
Wow.
yeah, so she'll be 21, and then I have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a soon-to-be 15-year-old.
Oh, wow. So you're in the early 20s teenage years right now.
Yeah, yeah. Pushed 2 of them out of the nest, at least partially. They're in college. One's out in Phoenix, and the other one is in Iowa at Iowa State. So
That's fascinating. My wife, I love our stories. My wife was adopted, and so a lot of the things you're talking about, we've been on the journey of her finding birth mom, then birth dad, and just the messages that came on to her. Even though her adoptive family was loving and kind and awesome, she still had messages that came on from the adoption and the curiosity.
yeah.
She talked about when they would do in elementary school, where do you get your eye color from? She'd be like, I don't know. Where do you get your hair color from? She could never answer any of those questions because she had no clue. And so it always felt awkward for her. She had to make up, answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you went on your initial weekend, what did you want for yourself?
I just felt sluggish. I felt like I was weighted down. And so I wanted freedom. I wanted to feel light and happy and excited. And I think for me, part of my history really included trying to numb
Absolutely
what you just talked about with your wife, So it wasn't really until that first weekend when I realized that it's okay to confront this. And for me, the message was, I'm a discard. I'm garbage. And so, and that, is, what we talk about in terms of like a pre-verbal wound, right? So it's a wound that happens before I have the ability to actually articulate it. And so a lot of it just sort of becomes part of the person, right? Like almost part of their cells, because there's no way for it to really escape verbally, And so all that to say that during that weekend, I realized that it's okay to have that shadow, and I don't need to deny and hide and repress that. Like, it's a part of my story. And all of us have some messages that maybe we are ashamed to admit out loud. And so what I was able to get was that freedom, It was really beautiful because I was able to, it's kind of like the biblical story of Jesus healing the blind, where like the scales come off. Like, there's something about that phrasing that felt very literal, to me. It wasn't literal, of course, but it felt like I was finally able to see my life in a way that was healing, at least the beginning of healing for me. And just being able to recognize that, hey, there were these 2 people who, for whatever reason, decided that it was best for me to be raised by different parents.
Yeah.
And it's okay to talk about that. And it's okay to feel some sort of way about that. But I had, prior to that, spent most of my life really saying, I know who my parents are, and they're great. And I know who my brothers are, and they're great. But there was still this underlying current that weighted me down because I never felt like it was okay to talk about it.
Right. And I think, you said discarded, unwanted. My wife, that was her big message, is somebody who gave birth to me didn't want me. She's gone and done work through another organization. But she said in all of her life, she always had in the back of her mind, then who else is not going to want me? I just have got to believe that this isn't going to be the only time this happens. So she lived her life thinking somebody else is going to make a decision to say, I don't want you, and lived her life to try so hard to not make that happen, but was just shackled to that
Mm,
I'm not wanted.
yeah, that's amazing. For me, one of these poignant moments I had where I just burst into tears was when my daughter was born. And so, like I said before, she's just turned 21. So it was about 21 years ago. I was holding her, and I have this Dominican rocking chair. And I remember I was holding her on that Dominican rocking chair, and she had just been born. And my wife, desperately needed to take a shower and clean up. And so I was rocking her, and I just burst into tears because I
Mm,
loved her so much, and I'd only known her for hours. And I was holding her and looking at her and her little fingernails and the little wrinkles on her knuckles, and just sort of touching her hand and feeling how amazingly soft it was. And she would look at me, with these big dark eyes like I had, and I just thought, how is it that anyone could give something so precious up? Like, there is nothing in the world that could happen to me right now where I would think that that's the best move.
right.
So for me, it just helped me. And really, she was the first person I ever knew who really looked like me. Like I'd never had a grandma, a grandpa, a cousin, who
Right.
looked like me. And so here it is. I'm holding this baby girl, and I just cherish her still to this day. And so, yeah, and I was bawling, and just in that place, I had a sense of
Mm,
compassion. So I don't exactly share your wife's story with that. Like, for me, it was a sense of compassion that whatever was happening in their lives had to be just, to them, insurmountable. Like,
right. And that's what,
it was
in
so
meeting,
strong. Yeah.
yeah, and meeting her birth mom and then birth dad, she totally understands why it happens. But it was in those formative years that I think all those questions
Mm,
came, and that still small voice that said, am I ever going to truly be wanted? And so that was the work she's had to
hmm
do. So on the weekend, how did God show up with all that you brought? And you probably already answered that, but how did God show up on your initial weekend?
Well, for me, I mean, it was multiple phases. I would say, similar to your wife, part of what I did was I just tried to appease everyone, you know, and be like the, hey, I go with the flow guy, right? And because of all that, I think that the anger work really helped me recognize that, hey, I can be angry, I can be safe in that anger, and God gave me that too. He didn't just give me happiness and excitement and joy and, contentment and peace. He also gave me anger and sadness. And I don't need to judge those as
Right,
bad, right? I needed to be able to be angry. It wasn't that I was angry at my birth parents, and it wasn't that I was angry with my parents, but I was angry at the situation, and angry and sad that it happened, and still being able to hold compassion. My parents can be amazing, and I can still
right.
be angry.
And probably let yourself know that having questions and being curious wasn't bad either. Like it wasn't dishonoring to your
Exactly.
adoptive parents. It's not a dishonor to be curious. There's not a message that you don't like them. You're just curious about what's going on, you know? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so for me, that was beautiful. And then now that was with the traditional weekend. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit because the TCP urban community didn't exist at that time.
Okay.
And so that community is about 10 years old now. And so later on in my journey, Greg Houston sort of tapped my shoulder and was like, hey, I really think that you should be a part of this urban community. And I was like, look, I don't live in the city. I live in the suburbs. Like, I don't really know this community. And I don't, just because I'm black doesn't mean like I really know this
Right.
community. So, but I really felt like it was a God thing. Like, Greg was a vessel, and he knew why he was asking me. And I needed to trust the process, just like I did on that initial weekend. In doing that, a new level of growth happened as a staff man. And part of what it is that I fully embraced and was able to love was my blackness. I realized just one, how much I love Black people, and how much then that I get to love my
Yeah.
Blackness. And that was something from a racial perspective that I hadn't necessarily been in tune with. On the phone, sometimes people aren't going to know that I'm that I'm Black, like I speak the King's English pretty well, and I can be in white spaces comfortably. And so my point is that there was a lot of kind of white culture and appreciation for whiteness that I took, and that's part of my gold. And I hadn't necessarily had the same amount of attention and love and appreciation for Blackness, in part because of my context. And so I always had, close Black friends and so on and so forth. And it was at that urban TCP weekend just felt so
Mm.
whole in all of
Yeah.
my identities as a Black man, as a believer, as someone who's adopted. And that moment just kind of reminded me and told me that, hey, I need to love this part of me too. And so that was really a powerful experience for me. And that's a community I still serve in. So
So, Tony, why is it so important? And why was it important? Why is it important for anybody that's listening to us today? Why is it important for them to know that they've got to love all parts of themselves? Why did you have to love your Blackness?
that's a great question. I think for me, when I talked to you earlier about how sluggish I was, I think part of that is because I would put in shadow parts of me. And it's something that everyone can see. When I walk into a room, everyone knows, hey, this dude's not white. you know, like I might show up sort of racially ambiguous sometimes for people because, well, it's the details I think that people think about, right? And so my hair is not, I don't have like tight curls, right? So I don't necessarily have quote unquote Black people hair. My point though is that all of these parts of myself deserve to be integrated and deserve to be
Mm-hmm.
seen. And if not, they become kind of warring parts of me. I can love my whiteness and my Blackness and my Latinidad, right?
Yeah.
And just be great. And so I think another piece that kind of woke up after that initial weekend is that a longing for Dominican
Mm.
culture. And so I was able to kind of engage in there's this Dominican American Midwest Association that's in Chicagoland. And so I sought them out and I'm like, hey, what do you guys do? And when do you meet? And where do you meet? And, reached out to the president of this organization. And now I'm very much a part of that community. And I show up at lots of events that they have. And oftentimes they're speaking all in Spanish the entire time. And I drag my kids with who are not bilingual at this point. One of them is pretty close, and just kind of wash ourselves in Dominican culture, Dominican music, Dominican thinking, Dominican history. And so I just think that in our world, sometimes we have a culture that says, hey, these sort of things we uphold, right? And oftentimes it is parts of white culture, and these sort of things we sort of hide, right? For me, I am all of these cultures,
Right.
and if I don't want them warring inside me, then it really is about appreciation and love of all these parts of me that help make me whole and confident, comfortable, joyous. So I think that that's part of the beauty of this work, is that we all have these warring parts of ourselves, and these parts of ourselves that we try to ignore. The Crucible Project tells us, hey, you know what? Recognize that, see it, love it, appreciate it. Um, and when we do that, then it doesn't kind of subliminally and subconsciously control us.
Yeah. And it's important, again, I love this because I think this is the work that I did. I learned to love all parts of me because if I left any part out, then those were the parts that I wouldn't love in other people. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Mm,
Love your neighbor as yourself. And so this learning to love all parts of your culture, all parts of who you are and who you were made to be, all parts of those are beautiful. And anything that we think is not beautiful, well, you're right, becomes warring in us, and we hide it, and then we don't become our true self, and it gets messed up, and we get all kinds of messages, and we got messages, and part of that is fighting those messages. So, man, thank you for all of that. I love that, and I love that you get to share those thoughts with people out there, because I promise you, there's somebody listening today that is multi-ethnic, multicultural. My grandkids, my son-in-law's last name is Cortez, and so I've got these white kids with the darkest brown eyes you've ever seen that are my grandkids, and they're just beautiful, and I love that they've got all of that, and it makes them very
Mm.
special, beautiful kiddos. So tell me about what is going on in the urban community. What do our listeners need to know about the beauty of the urban community and what is going on in that area?
Yeah, I'm glad you just said what you did. And I think that love piece is the most important, right? And that when we are able to love and identify and embrace the parts of us that we maybe historically shed,
Mm-hmm.
it helps us better appreciate, accept, and love others. So thank you for that. So to this question, I think that the urban community it's amazing. We have so many different things going on, and part of our work is connected to a couple of churches in the city, and they are doing amazing work. I mean, one of the churches actually has a boxing club that meets at the church regularly, and they're really reaching the community well. Another one of the churches has, like a hip hop church service, and has legal support, and the church actually owns and runs a Lou Malnati's, which is Chicago pizza joint. And so the church owns this pizza restaurant and helps really these individuals who may have just gotten out of prison learn some skills at this Lou Malnati's. Really just kind of, they think about these communities holistically. So it's amazing what's happening in these communities, mainly in Lawndale and the little village neighborhood. And within the community itself, our rhythm really has been 2 weekends a year. And right now we're focusing on the initial level weekend. The idea really is that, we want to be fully self-sustaining community. And so it's taken some time, but we have a group of leaders who meet monthly, and we connect and set some goals out. And then, like I said before, I mean, we recently celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So we've really been doing this for a decade, which is pretty amazing, because it started as this idea, this experiment, right, of Greg's, and it's really taken off. And so I'm thankful that for just all the leaders that we have in there. And we really do rely on these community leaders to encourage people to sign up. And they've really kind of systematized it. What I mean by that is, some of them are counselors, for example, and they're marital counselors. And so pre-marriage, they ask the men to go on one of these weekends. Like, this is kind of part of the pre-marriage programming.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so these couples can really start their marriage with some understanding of their emotions and really know their gold. And so that's an exciting aspect as well. So we're leveraging some of these professional roles to get things off the ground. We also have some coaches involved who do a lot of work with adolescents. And so that's one of our emerging conversations really is, hey, what is it that the urban community can do for adolescents? What might this look like? How can we get a weekend designed for, urban adolescents that really uplifts these individuals? And so we have lots, on the horizon we're excited about. We also have some real dear friends and community members of ours who have left our community, but still are very actively involved. And so there's talks about Atlanta, because one of them has
Wow.
moved to Atlanta. There's talks about North Carolina as well, because one of them has moved there. And so we have, of course, opportunities to plant and to expand some of our largest numbers of members have really come in from St. Louis and then also Detroit. And so we often get men from both those communities who are coming to our weekends as well. And there's been talks about how it is that we could support both the St. Louis and the Detroit community. So we've got a lot going on, Andy.
I love it. Hey, we need somebody from your leadership and your team to move to Houston and decide Houston's a place for the next community.
There we go.
I love it. You know, there's only 5 or
Absolutely.
6 million people down here, so
Right. I think we've got the market there.
Yeah. So what
Gosh.
what do you feel like is the best thing that you guys are bringing to the urban community with this work?
You know, I think our Black and brown brothers and sisters have a similar story, right, as our white brothers and sisters, in that the idea of emotions and being able to, one, articulate what I'm feeling, two, connect it to specific context is critical. And so we all know in this work that, you know, when we're able to identify how we're feeling, why we're feeling, then we're able to kind of move through our quadrants, right? And think about it from a warrior and a sage and a lover, right, perspective. And so I think that the work is even more important in our urban communities as we're combating violence and we're combating poverty and we're combating family, you know, dynamics and all that happens, you know, because of systemic racism. And so I think for us, what we want to do is continue to embolden and strengthen these communities so that they can continue to be articulate, continue to be strong healers in our community. You know, we've done a lot of that, which has been great too, especially about building bridges across brown and Black communities. And we've had multiple parades and events and other kind of situations like that. I mean, some of the guys even wear T-shirts that speak to the brown and Black unity in their communities. And so it's been really fun to see kind of how these men from these communities are using the warrior and using their anger in such beautiful, healthy ways to create healing. And so a lot of what we see might not get stamped with a TCP marketing pledge, right? But it's because of TCP that some of these men are leaning into these difficult situations and difficult kind of social conflicts and create healing. It's really lovely to see how these men are working. And some, you know, of our graduates have created entire organizations that are meeting the needs of Black males and helping them to get, you know, entrepreneurial skills, help them to get money and financing to start businesses. And it's really amazing. One of them is called the Male Mogul Project. And so it's really just been exciting to see the fruits of this work and how it is that, you know, as men continue to go through, you know, not only the first weekend, but through multiple weekends, we're able to see how they take what might have been just like a little leadership project and turn it into a, you know, a thriving organization. And so, yeah, the Male Mogul Initiative is just one example of that. You know, one of our men who decided to really give his all, his 100%, and then some, to transforming lives of kids in the city. So it's amazing.
Man, that is amazing. And to think that, you know, the doing work and getting past the messages and getting past even the things that says you can't or you're not worthy or you don't have it or whatever, just getting past those messages and then having someone that believes in you, that looks like you and believes in you,
Right.
can help you realize, okay, this can be done.
Yeah. 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 So just the other day, I was listening to Trevor Noah, and he's got this new podcast out. And part of what he was talking about, he's like, you know what? Every time I have the opportunity to talk to a CEO of one of these monstrous companies, I ask them, hey, why'd you get here? Like, how'd you get here? Like, what happened to get you to be the CEO of this company? And he said to a T, he said that someone gave him a shot. Someone said, hey, you know what? You remind me of me. I see myself in you. And so they give him a shot,
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what we see, that those are some of the ripples that we see in the TCP urban community, is that these men now, like you said, have this new level of compassion, understanding, appreciation for others in the community, and are able to see themselves in them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a result are reaching out and making opportunities happen. And so that's the work that I think it's hard to quantify, but it's the stories of these communities that are really transforming entire communities as a result of this work. And so part of what I'm thinking about is Phil Jackson and his work. What's been exciting is that he is a pastor, and he is in a church now that is being led by a Crucible brother. And so we have just this strong team of folks who are Crucible brothers who are transforming this entire neighborhood. Terrence Foster.
Oh yeah.
Works closely with Phil Jackson, and then their pastor. The three of them actually have a podcast themselves, and so these guys now have been up for awards, as a result of their podcast, and really as a result of their work, right? The podcast is really just them kind of talking about their work,
right?
But the power of three men who are Crucible brothers leading a local church down there it's unfathomable just how much they can do. And so, one of the recent projects really is about raising funds to create a recording studio. And so these guys are working together to create those funds to build a recording studio that's in this old firehouse. And so this community arts center is now in an previous firehouse, and
wow.
It's just incredible what it is that they're doing. And so our community is vibrant. We're transforming entire neighborhoods, entire churches. We're integrating this work into counseling practices. We, are continuing to build leaders who are going to be carpet facilitators and weekend leaders. And the reality of it is that a lot of the women in this community have also gone through a version, whether it be liminal or, it doesn't matter to us, obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but it doesn't matter to us exactly what weekend our women have gone through. What matters is that they're in this work, and that also is powerful because now, husbands and wives, like you talked about, are in the community together, leaning into this work and really transforming it.
Man, I love it. Tony, man, I'm excited. Thank you so much for sharing all of this today. I cannot wait for this to go out and for people to hear about it, to pray about what you guys are doing to celebrate with you. If you've been listening to this podcast and you want to know more about the Crucible Project and what is going on, go to www.thecrucibleproject.org. Find a weekend to go on, find a place to serve, and be a part of this work that really is transforming lives individually, but as you've heard today, transforming lives on a community-wide level. Man, Tony, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Andy.
God bless you, brother.
Appreciate you. God bless you.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you're listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.